Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. And tonight, along with our companions Dante and Virgil, we will continue our descent into hell. When we last left Virgil and Dante, they were in the seventh circle. Now, the seventh circle has 3 rounds to it. 1, 2, 3, going lower. And the seventh circle, if you remember, is violence. There are 3 kinds of violence: against your fellow man, violence against yourself, and violence against nature and art, which are the grandchildren of God. We will walk through the remainder of Circle 7 and see what Circle 8 holds for us. Dante, in pity, restores the torn leaves to the soul of his countrymen, and the poets move on to the next round, a great plain of burning sand, upon which there descends an eternal slow rain of fire. Here, scorched by fire from above and below, are 3 classes of sinners suffering different degrees of exposure to the fire. The blasphemers, the violent against God, are stretched supine upon the sand. The sodomites, the violent against nature, run in endless circles. And the usurers, the violent against art, which is the grandchild of God, huddle on the sands. The poets find Capaneus stretched out on the sands, the chief sinner of that place. He is still blaspheming God. They continue along the edge of the wood of the suicides and come to a blood-red rill, which flows boiling from the wood and crosses the burning plain. Virgil explains the miraculous power of its waters and discourses on the old man of Crete and the origin of all the rivers of hell. The symbolism of the burning plain is obviously centered in sterility, the desert image, and wrath, the fire image. Blasphemy, sodomy, and usury are all unnatural and sterile actions. Thus, the unbearing desert is the eternity of these sinners, and thus the rain, which in nature should be fertile and cool, descends as fire. Capaneus, moreover, is subjected not only to the wrath of nature, the sands below, and the wrath of God, the fire from above, but is tortured most by his own inner violence, which is the root of blasphemy. Love of that land that was our common source moved me to tears. I gathered up the leaves and gave them back. He was already hoarse. We came to the edge of the forest where one goes from the second round to the third, and there we saw what fearful arts the hand of justice knows. To make these new things wholly clear, I say we came to a plain whose soil repels all roots. The wood of misery rings it in the same way the wood itself is ringed by the red fosse. We paused at its edge. The ground was burning sand, just such a waste as Cato marched across. O endless wrath of God, how utterly thou shalt become a terror to all men who read the frightful truths revealed to me. Enormous herds of naked souls I saw, lamenting till their eyes were burned of tears. They seemed condemned by an unequal law. For some were stretched supine upon the sand, some squatted with their arms about themselves, and others, without pause, roamed around and around. Most numerous were those that roamed the plain. Far fewer were the souls stretched on the sand, but moved to louder cries by greater pain. And over all that sand on which they lay or crouched or roamed, Great flakes of flame fell slowly, as snow falls in the Alps on a windless day. Like those Alexander met in the hot regions of India, flames raining from the sky to fall unextinguished on his legions, whereat he formed his ranks, and at their head set the example, trampling the hot ground for fear the tongues of fire might join and spread. Just so in hell descended the long rain upon the damned, kindling the sand like tinder under a flint and steel, doubling the pain. In a never-ending fit upon those sands, the arms of the damned twitched all about their bodies, now here, now there, brushing away all the brands. Poet, I said, master of every dread we have encountered, other than those fiends who sailed from the last gate of the dead, who is that wraith who lies along the rim and sets his face against the fire in scorn, so that the rain seems not to mellow him? And he himself, hearing what I had said to my guide and lord concerning him, replied, "What I was living, the same I am now, dead. Though Jupiter wear out his sooty smith, from whom on my last day he snatched in anger the jagged thunderbolt he pierced me with, though he wear out the others one by one, who labor at the forge at Mongebello, crying again, 'Help! Help! Help me, good Vulcan!' as he did at Phlegra, and hurled down endlessly with all the power of heaven in his arm, a small satisfaction would he win from me." At this my guide spoke with such vehemence as I had not heard from him in all of hell. "O Capenius, by your insolence you are made to suffer as much fire inside as what falls upon you. Only your own rage could be fit torment for your sullen pride." Then he turned to me more gently. "That," he said, "was one of the 7 who laid siege to Thebes. Living, he scorned God, and among the dead he scorns him yet. He thinks he may detest God's power too easily, but as I told him, his slobber is a fit badge for his breast. Now follow me, and mind for your own good you do not step upon the burning sand, but keep well back along the edge of the wood." We walked in silence then, till we reached a rill that gushes from the wood. It ran so red, the memory sends a shudder through me still. As from the bullock came springs the stream the sinful woman keep to their own use, so down the sand the rill flowed out in a stream. The bed and both its banks were petrified, as were its margins. Thus I knew at once our passage through the sand lay by its side. Among all others I have shown you, since we came through the gate denied to none, nothing your eyes have seen is equal to the marvel of the rill by which we stand, for it stifles all the flame above its course as it flows out across the burning sand. So spoke my guide across the flickering light, and I begged him to bestow on me the food for which he had given me the appetite. "In the middle of the sea, and gone to waste, there lies a country known as Crete," he said, "under whose king the ancient world was chaste. Once Rhea chose it as the secret crypt and cradle of her son, and better to hide him, her Corybantis raised a din when he wept. An ancient giant stands in the mountain's core. He keeps his shoulder turned toward Damietta, and looks towards Rome as if it were his mirror. His head is made of gold, of silver work his breast and both his arms, of polished brass the rest of his torso to the fork. He is of chosen iron, from there down, except that his right foot is terracotta. It is this foot he rests more weight upon. Every part, except the gold, is split by a great fissure from which endless tears drip down and hollow out the mountain's pit. Their course sinks from this pit from stone to stone, becoming Acheron, Phlegethon, and the river Styx. Then, By this narrow sluice they hurtle down to the end of all descent, and disappear into Cocytus. You shall see what sink that is with your own eyes. I pass it in silence here. And I to him, but if these waters flow from the world above, why is this rill met only along the shelf? And he to me, you know this place is round, and though you have come deep into the valley through the many circles, always bearing left upon the steep, you have not traveled in any circle in its total round. Hence, when new things appear from time to time, that should hardly surprise you. And I, where shall we find Phlegethon's course, and Lethe's? One you admit, and the other you only say the tear flood is its source. In all you ask of me, you please me truly, he answered, but the red and boiling water should answer the first question you put to me, and you shall stand by Lethe, but far hence, there, where the spirits go and wash themselves when their guilt has been removed by penitence. And then he said, now it is time to quit this edge of shade. Follow close after me along the rill, and do not stray from it. For the unbumming margins form a lane, and by them we may cross this burning plain. Protected by the marvelous powers of the boiling rill, the poets walk along its banks, across the burning plain. The wood of the suicides is behind them. The great cliff, at whose foot lies the eighth circle, is before them. They pass one of the roving bands of sodomites. One of the sinners stops Dante, and with great difficulty the poet recognizes him under his baked features as Brunetto Latino. This is a reunion with a dearly loved man and writer, one who had considerably influenced Dante's own development, and Dante addresses him with great and sorrowful affection, paying him the highest tribute offered to any sinner in the Inferno. Brunetto prophesies Dante's suffering at the hands of the Florentines, gives an account of the souls that move with him through the fire, and finally, under divine compulsion, races off across the plain. We go one by one of the stone margins now, and the steam of the rivulets makes a shade above it, guarding the steam and banks from the flaming snow. As the Flemings in the lowland between Bruges and Wissant, under constant threat of the sea, erect their great dikes to hold back the deluge, as the Padawans along the shores of the Brent build levees to protect their towns and castles, lest Carionata drown in the spring torrent. To the same plan, though not so wide nor high, did the engineer, whoever he may have been, design the margin we were crossing by. Already, in 3. Already we were so far from the wood that, even had I turned around to look at it, I could not have made it out from where I stood, when a company of shades came into sight, walking beside the bank. They stared at us, as men at evening, by the new moon's light, stare at one another when they pass by on a dark road, pointing their eyebrows towards us, as an old tailor squints at his needle's eye. Stared at so closely by that ghostly crew, I was recognized by one who seized the hem of my skirt and said, "Wonder of wonders! You?" And I, when he stretched out his arm to me, searched his baked features closely, till at last I traced his image from my memory in spite of the burnt crust, and bending near to put my face closer to his, at last I answered, "Sir Brunetto, are you here?" "Oh, my son, may it not displease you," he cried, "if Bruno Latino leave his company, and turn and walk a little by your side?" And I to him, "With all my soul I ask it, or let us sit together, if it please him who is my guide and leads me through this pit." "My son," he said, Whoever of this train pauses a moment must lie 100 years forbidden to brush off the burning rain. Therefore go on. I will walk at your hem, and then rejoin my company, which goes mourning eternal loss in eternal flame. I did not dare descend to his own level, but kept my head inclined as one who walks in reverence, meditating good and evil. What brings you here before your own last day? What fortune or what destiny, he began, and who is he that leads you this dark way? Up there in the happy life I went astray in a valley, I replied, before I had reached the fullness of my years. Only yesterday at dawn I turned from it. This spirit showed himself to me as I was turning back, and guides me home again along this road. And he, follow your star, for if in all of the sweet life I saw one truth shine clearly, you cannot miss your glorious arrival. And had I lived to do what I meant to do, I would have cheered and seconded your work, observing heaven so well disposed towards you. But that ungrateful and malignant stalk that came down from Fiesole of old, and still smacks of the mountain and the rock, for your good works will be your enemy. And there is cause. The sweet fig is not meant to bear its fruit beside the bitter sorb tree. Even the old adage calls them blind, an envious, proud, and avaricious people. See that you root their customs from your mind. It is written in your stars, and will come to pass that your honors shall make both sides hunger for you, but the goat shall never reach to crop that grass. Let the beasts devour their get like sows, but never let them touch the plant, if among their rankness any springs up yet, in which is born against the holy seed of the Romans, who remained among their rabble when Florence made a new nest for their greed. Had I all my wish, I answered then, you would not yet be banished from the world in which you were a radiance among men. For that sweet image, gentle and paternal, you were to me in the world when hour by hour you taught me how a man makes himself eternal, lives in my mind, and now strikes to my heart. And while I live, the gratitude I owe it will speak to men out of my life and art. What you have told me of my course, I write by another text I saved to show a lady who will judge these matters, if I reach her height. This much I would have you know. So long, I say, as nothing in my conscience troubles me, I am prepared for fortune, come what may. Twice already in the eternal shade I have heard this prophecy, but let fortune turn her wheel as she pleases, and the countryman his spade. My guiding spirit paused at my last word, and, turning right about, stood eye to eye, to say to me, well heeded is well heard. But I did not reply to him, going on with Sir Brunetto, to ask him who he was with in the hot sands, the best born and best known. And he to me, of some who share this walk, it is good to know. Of the rest of us, and he to me, 3. Of some who share this walk, it is good to know. Of the rest let us say nothing, for the time would be too short for so much talk. In brief, we were all clerks and men of worth, great men of letters, scholars of renown, and all by the same crime defiled on earth. Priscian moves there along the worrisome, sad way, and Francesco di Accorso. And also there, if you have any longings for such scum, you might have seen that one servant of servants sent from the Arno to the Baclione, where he left his unnatural organ wrapped in cerements. I would say no more, but there across the sand a new smoke rises, and the new people come, and I must run to be with my own band. Remember my treasure, in which I shall live on. I ask no more. He turned then, and he seemed to cross that plain like one of those who run for the green cloth at Verona, and one of those more like the one who wins than of those who lose. The poets arrive within hearing of the waterfall that plunges over the great cliff into the eighth circle. The sound is still a distant throbbing when three wraiths, recognizing Dante's Florentine dress, detach themselves from their band and come running towards him. They are Jacopo Rusticicci, Guido Guerrera, and Tegaio Aldobrani, all of them Florentines whose policies and personalities Dante admired. Rusticicci and Tegaio have already been mentioned in a highly complimentary way in Dante's talk with Siaco. The sinners ask for news of Florence, and Dante replies with a passionate lament for her present degradation. The three wraiths return to their band, and the poets continue to the top of the falls. Here, at Virgil's command, Dante removes a cord from about his waist, and Virgil drops it over the edge of the abyss. If in answer to a signal, a great distorted shape comes swimming up through the dirty air of the pit. We could already hear the rumbling drive of the waterfall in its plunge to the next circle, a murmur like the throbbing of a hive, when three shades turned together on the plain, breaking towards us from a company that went its way to torture in that rain. They cried with one voice as they ran towards me, "Wait! Oh, wait! For by your dress you seem a voyager from our own tainted country." Ah, what wounds I saw, some new, some old, branded upon their bodies. For now the pain of it in memory turns me cold. My teacher heard their cries, and turning to, stood face to face. "Do as they ask," he said, "for these are souls to whom respect is due. And if it was not for the darting flames that hem our narrow passage in, I should have said it would be more fitting if you ran after them." We paused, and they began their ancient wail over again, and when they stood below us, they formed themselves into a moving wheel, as naked and anointed champions do in feeling out their grasp and their advantage before they close in for the thrust or blow. So circling, each one stared up at my height, and as their feet moved left around the circle, their necks kept turning backwards to the right. "In the misery of this place, and our unkempt and scorched appearance," one of them began, "bring us and what we pray into contempt. Still may our earthly flame move you to tell who and what you are. Who so securely set your live feet to the dead dusts of hell? This peeled and naked soul who runs before me around this wheel was higher than you think there in the world in honor and degree. Guido Guerrera was the name he bore, the good Gualdera's grandson. In his life he won great fame in council and in war. The other behind me who treads this sand was Tiago Aldobrani, whose good counsels the world would have done well to understand. And I, who share their torment in my life, was Jacopo Rusticicci. Above all, I owe my sorrows to a savage wife." I would have thrown myself to the plain below had I been sheltered from the falling fire, and I think my teacher would have let me go. But seeing I should be burned and cooked, my fear overcame the first impulse of my heart to leap down and embrace them then and there. "Not contempt," I said, "but the compassion that seizes on my soul and memory at the thought of you tormented in this fashion. It was grief that choked my speech when through the scorching air of this pit my Lord announced to me that such men as you might be approaching. I am of your own land, and I have always heard with affection and rehearsed with honor your name and the good deeds of your happier days. Led by my guide and his truth, I leave the Gaul and go for the sweet apples of delight. But first I must ascend to the center of all. So may your soul and body long continue together on the way you go, he answered, and the honor of your days shine after you. Tell me if courtesy and valor raise their banners in our city as of old, or has the glory faded from its days? For Boissier, who is newly come among us, and yonder goes with our compassions in pain, taunts us with such reports, and his words have stung us. O Florence, your sudden wealth and your upstart rabble, dissolute and overweening, already set you weeping. O Florence, 3. O Florence, your sudden wealth and your upstart rabble, dissolute and overweening, already set you weeping in your heart. I cried with face upraised, and on the sand, those 3 sad spirits looked at one another, like men who hear the truth and understand. If this be your manner of speaking, and if you can satisfy others with such ease and grace, they said as one, we hail a happy man. Therefore, if you win through this gloomy pass and climb again to see the heaven of stars, when it rejoices to you, say, I was. Speak of us to the living. They parted then, breaking their turning wheel, and as they vanished over the plain, their legs seemed wings. Amen could not have been pronounced between their start and their disappearance over the rim of sand. And then it pleased my master to depart. A little way beyond, in 3. A little way beyond we felt the quiver and roar of the cascade, so close that speech would have been drowned in thunder. As that river, the first one on the left of the Apennines, to have a path of its own from Monte Viso to the Adriatic Sea, which, as it twines, is called the Aquicetta from its source until it nears Forli. Then it is known as Montone. In its further countersounds from the mountain in a single leap, there, above San Benedito, where 1,000 falls might fit into the steep. So down from a sheer bank, in one enormous plunge, the tainted water roared so loud, a little longer there would have deafened us. I had a cord bound around me like a belt, which I had once thought I might put to use to snare the leopard with the gaudy pelt. When at my guide's command I had unbound its loops from about my habit, and gathered it and held it out to him all coiled and wound. He bent far back to his right, and throwing it out from the edge, sent it in a long arc into the bottomless darkness of the pit. Now surely some unusual event, I said to myself, must follow this new signal upon which my good guide is so intent. Ah, how cautiously a man should breathe near those who see not only what we do, but have the sense which reads the mind beneath. He said to me, you will soon see arise what I awake, and what you'll wonder at. Soon you will see that thing before your eyes. To the truth, which will seem falsehood, every man who would not be called a liar while speaking fact should learn to seal his lips as best he can. But here I cannot be still. Reader, I swear by the lines of my comedy, so it may live, that I saw coming up through that foul air a shape to astonish the most doughty soul, a shape like one returning through the sea from working loose an anchor run afoul of something on the bottom. So it rose, its arms spread upwards, and its feet drawn close. That was Canto 14, 15, and 16 of the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. The seventh circle is big because it's violence, and unlike heresy, violence never goes out of style. There's 3 rounds: the violent against themselves, violent against their neighbor, and violent against God. Violence against yourself is like gluttony, suicide. Violent against your neighbor is pretty obvious, and violence against God. We only have one more round to do, violent against God, and we move on to the 8th floor. And right when we get there, Virgil has lured some sort of monster out of a bottomless pit using Dante's belt. Well, we'll deal with that next time, because this has been Doctorpiece Theater, and my name is Dr. Dennis Business. And as always, my friends,